Welcome back. In the previous lesson, we have discussed about variable and assignment. Now, in this lesson, we're going to discuss about typecasting. The meaning of typecasting is we convert the one data type into another data type. Means if the variable is having the data type of integer, we will convert that variable data type into float values. Alright, so that's what the typecasting means. And here all the different types of typecasting is possible in Python. Those are integer to float, integer to string, float to integer, float to string, boolean to integer, boolean to float, boolean to string, and string to integer. This is the conditional. There are few conditions to convert the string to integer and also string to float. This is also conditional. First, let me take a variable called int number, and let me take this int number as 5. Okay, now this int number, if I look at the data type of it, obviously the data type is integer. And in order to convert this into the float, in order to convert the integer into float values, so converting integer to float, all you need to do is we need to use a command called float and use the float and pass the int number. So this is the variable, and now I'll get the float number, something like this. Alright, now we can print the float number, and also let me print the data type of it. Is type of float number, and obviously the expected answer is 5.0 and the data type is float. That's what you're seeing here. What you see is 5.0 and the data type is class of float. So obviously this is a float data type. Even if you print here, even if you print the type of int number, what you see is a class of int. Okay, so that's how we can actually convert the int to float. Okay, so similarly we can also convert the int to string. Convert int to string. In order to convert the int to string, the command is str. If you use the str, what happens is it's not only the float, it's not only the int value. What are the data type? It'll try to convert that into the string. So for example, here let me give the int number, and let me also give string float number, and even I can also convert that into the float values into strings. Okay, now you can print string number, and let me also print float number, and let me also look into the data type. Data type of str number is type of str number. Similarly, data type of string float number is type of string float number. And here we go, what you're seeing is the converting the number into string, which is 5, and the float number is a 5.0. So maybe you're seeing, okay, since this is a print will only display some value. So if you print separately here, and that's what you can see here, it was starting with some code and then you get some value which is inside, which means that this is a string. And similarly in this case it's also same. What you see is some code and followed by some number, and this is a string. Cool, right? This is how we can actually convert the int into the float and also into a string, int to string. Basically, even the float values also can be converted into string. Let me show you another case, like converting the float into the integer. But this is a different case. So what I meant to say is there are different types of converting the float into the integer, float to integer. So let me consider a value 1, and which is something like 5.1, and value 2, let's say this is my 5.6. Okay, now one of the easiest way that we can convert the float into integer is that the command is int, and if I provide the value 1, and if I let's say this is my value 1, okay, this is the int value 1 and int value 2, which is int of value 2. Now let me print int, let's say this is my value 1. Now let me print int val1 is int val1. We copy this and paste it here, and this is my int val2 is int val2. What happens? What you have noticed is this is the 5.1 and the value 2 is the 5.6, and the converting into the float to integer is with the command int, and using which we can actually convert that, but both the values what you're seeing is same. So what it's trying to do is it's trying to round off to this value only. So irrespective of this, it will not round off to the closest value. So basically int command will not round off to nearest value. So in this case, what I meant to say is the round off the nearest value for the 5.1 is 5, the nearest value for the 5.6 is 6, but however in this case both the values are round off to 5. It only look into the value something like this. This is the value to see, which is 5, and that's how it's going to convert that into the 5. But however, in order to round off to the nearest value and also to round off to the specific value, either to the highest or lowest, there we have a special commands are there. Special commands. So there are some special commands to convert from float to int. So those special characters are: one is round, which is very easy to understand. So wherever the value which is closest to it, it round off to that particular value. And second is ceil and floor. Let's look into these commands very detailed. The first one is round, which is pretty straightforward and you can understand this. So let me copy this and let me paste it here. What I'm using is that the value 1 is 5.1 and the value 2 is 5.6. So what I'll do is the int value, and here let me take, instead of int, let me use round. This is round. Now what happens is that if I execute this, and here the int value 1, so basically the value 1 is 5.1 and it is round off to the closest value to it, which is 5, and the value 2 is 5.6 and the closest value is 6. Now it is round off to 6. So even here, let's say if the value is 5.51, what happens is that this will round off to the nearest value, which is 6. Okay, so that's what you have to understand here. Cool. Cool. Now let's look into the ceil and float. Ceil, the definition of ceil is it will always round off up to the nearest number. So basically it will always look to the next number. So in simple, it will always look to the next number. And whereas floor, it will always round down to nearest number. So basically it's a previous number. Okay, So what I meant to say is that ceil, irrespective of it's a 5.1 or 5.01, it will always looks to the next number, means up to the next nearest number. So in this case, if you apply ceil to this or this, it will always convert that into 6. Whereas floor will always look for the downwards, which is 5. However, the ceil and floor are not the default commands. In order to use these commands, what you have to do is we need to import this from the math module. Alright, here we are importing the first package, which is math. So again, this package is directly available in Python. You no need to install anywhere. But however, in our case, we are using the Anaconda, where all the packages are pre-installed. Let's define or let's import ceil and floor. In order to import this from math, import ceil and put one more comma and floor. These are the two commands I'm trying to import. Shift enter. Now you're going to execute this. Now let's apply the ceil to it. So let me give the definition of ceil. The ceil rounds a number up to the nearest integer. Okay, so let's take this ceil, and this is also ceil. Now let's look into the value. So basically, if you remember the value 1, what we have is the 5.1, and the value 2, what we have is 5.51. Now if you execute this, that's what it means. The ceil always round out to the nearest up. This is very important, up to the nearest number integer. And let's also quickly look into the floor, which is actually the opposite of ceil, and it will always look to the down to the nearest integer. Okay, so this is the floor which we have imported. Let me copy and paste it here, and in this case the value 1 is 5.1 and the value is 5.51. It will round up to 5. Cool. So this is how we can actually use the ceil, floor, round and int to convert the float values into the integer. Super cool, right? So similarly, we can also have the different types of casting is there, which is the bool to integer, bool to float, bool to string. Bool is boolean value. Okay, so bool to string, float, and what? We have string. Oh, integer. So again, just try to remember that bool value is either 0 or 1, which essentially means it is false, 0 is false, and 1 is true. Okay, so the conversion that we're converting into any value into the boolean value is, we can use bool. Let's say you have some integer value, let's say 2. Now what happens is this, if you execute this, let's say bool value, and if you print the bool value, and that's what it means. So basically what exactly happens is any value, so how this bool works, any value greater than or less than 0, any value is greater than 0 and less than 0, then the value is 1 or true. If the value is 0, then the value is 0 or false. That's how the bool will work. So if I provide some 0 to it, then only it's become false. Even any negative number, any positive value that you have provided, it will always show you true. Okay, so that's how you can actually convert any value into the boolean. Similarly, let's say you have some boolean value is there with you, something like true, and you can also convert that boolean value into integer or float. For that you can use int and int of true, which actually convert that into the integer value, which is always 1. So that's how we can use the boolean and convert into the, okay. And similarly, if at all you want to convert the boolean into the string, then what we can use is str, and if you provide true, and this will convert into string. And similarly, we can provide the false to it, and this will convert into string values. That's the meaning of string values. Cool. And finally, let's look into the string to integer, which is actually most important. In order to convert that string into the integer, so this is the two cases. And again, I mentioned here specifically this is conditionally. See, not every string values cannot convert into the integer. For example, let's say I have some variable. Let's say this is my variable 7 and something like data science. This is a variable, and this variable, if at all I want to convert this into integer float, which is not possible. This value cannot convert into integer or float. This is actually not at all possible. Always remember one thing, the value that whatever you are actually want to convert into integer or float is such a way, if the value in the string is a numerical, then only you can actually do this. Okay, but let's say if at all you want to convert this, it will show an error saying that invalid literal for int with base 10, and also it is not possible even with the float. Could not convert the string into the float because this is a data science. So when this is possible, let's say this is my variable 8, and in this variable 8 we have some called 5.1, which is a string, and this is possible. Now here what I can do is variable 8, let's say variable 8, and this is my float. I can use a float of var 8, and this I can actually convert into float values. So now we can actually print, let's say var 8 float and print data type of var 8 float. Now here you go, this is what we can see. Now we have successfully converted into the data type float. And here there is one caveat is that this value actually I cannot convert into integer, even though the value is numeric value is present, but this I cannot convert into integer. I'll get an error and saying that this is not possible, saying that invalid literal for int with base 10. This is not at all possible. So always remember one thing, this int will only work if the variable inside it contains the int format. And here whenever the variable type is having the int format, then only it will convert into the integer value. Suppose if at all you want to convert this one, and here I want to convert this into the integer, then what you have to do is first you convert into the float and then you convert into the integer. That we already know. We already see how to convert into the float into integer by help of int. And again there are three values are there, and again it depends upon your usage. Like we have the round, we have ceil, and we have float. There are different values or different ways we can convert float values into integer values. Okay, so that's what it means. And here we go, this is how we can convert the string into float into integer. Cool, right? So this is about the typecasting. In the next lesson we're going to talk more on this. Until then, happy learning.